It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, our top story. 3 more Israeli hostages released after nearly 500 days held by Hamas, as relatives express shock at their gaunt appearance. On the West Bank, more than 180 Palestinians freed from Israeli jails in the 5th exchange since the Gaza ceasefire. Enthusiastic, affectionate, happy. The parents of 2 of the Southport victims paid tribute to their daughters and described the moment they heard they'd been attacked. Badly misjudged, Health Minister Andrew Gwynn apologizes after being sacked for offensive comments posted in a WhatsApp group. Also ahead, hundreds attend a march, and Sheffield United pays tribute to 15-year-old Harvey Walgoose, who was stabbed to death at his school. Plus, a royal buon appetito. The king hosts an Italian-themed dinner for the great and the good ahead of his state visit to Italy later this year. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30. Good evening. Hamas has freed 3 more Israeli hostages in Gaza, and Israel has released 183 Palestinian prisoners as part of a ceasefire deal. The condition of the Israeli hostages, who appeared gaunt and frail, was met with condemnation from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Here, Keir Starmer said he was dismayed at the condition of Israeli hostage Eli Sharabi, whose Bristol-born wife and daughters were killed by militants in the October 7th attacks. It comes as Israel has reportedly sent a delegation to Qatar for Phase 2 ceasefire talks. Phase 2 of the 3-phase deal focuses on the release of the remaining hostages and the withdrawal of Israeli troops from Gaza. Our Middle East correspondent Alistair Bunkle has this report.
Hamas put up a stage in Deir al-Balah in the centre of Gaza for the 5th release of the hostages. These are propaganda moments for Hamas, an opportunity to show that they have not been defeated and still have some control in Gaza, and a message to President Trump that they have no intention of leaving. The hostages, looking thin and frail, were paraded on stage, carrying certificates and then interviewed by a Hamas fighter before they were released. Eli Sharabi said that he was looking forward to seeing his wife Liane and 2 daughters again. He didn't know that all 3 of them had been killed on October the 7th. His brother Yossi was also taken hostage but died last year in Gaza.
All the way through this, we've wondered whether what's kept him going is the prospect of being reunited with Liane and the girls. I know that the first question that he's going to ask as soon as he got into the Red Cross vehicle was going to be, if he doesn't know that they're dead, are Liane and the girls waiting for me? And I think one of the distressing things for me to think about is that news, if it has to be broken to him, is going to be broken to him by a stranger in the back of a jeep on Gazan soil.
The 3 men appeared weak as they were transferred to the IDF. There is a real feeling of shock and anger in Israel tonight, and a new urgency to get all of the hostages home as quick as possible. Benjamin Netanyahu, spending the weekend in Washington, has reacted angrily and warned that there will be consequences, without elaborating what.
The State of Israel views Hamas's repeated violations with great severity and the situation of the 3 abductees who were released this morning with great severity. We will not remain silent about this. A message has been passed on to the mediators and actions will be taken accordingly.
The 3 men have been reunited with their families. They're now being looked after at a hospital outside Tel Aviv. In exchange, 183 Palestinian prisoners were released from Israeli jails. Most of them were sent back to Gaza. 42 were taken into the West Bank. They emerged from the buses wearing the black and white Palestinian keffiyeh, making victory signs and into celebrating crowds. At least 1 elderly man had to be carried off the coach. 7 were taken to hospital for medical treatment. Israeli prison guards reportedly made them watch a video showing the destruction of Gaza before they were released. Both sides are accusing the other of unacceptable tactics. But we are almost halfway through the first phase of the ceasefire, and it still holds for now. Alistair Bungle, Sky News, in Jerusalem.
The parents of two of the young victims of the Southport murders have been describing the moment they heard their daughters had been attacked. In a wide-ranging interview with the Sunday Times, the parents of Elsie Stancombe and BB King reflect on the girls' personalities and their sense of loss. 7-year-old Elsie and 6-year-old BB were killed alongside 9-year-old Alice da Silva Guiar at a Taylor Swift-themed dance workshop last July. Elsie and BB's parents say they don't think the sentencing of their killer should have been televised and back calls for a public inquiry. Well, our correspondent Shaman Freeman-Powell joins me here. Shaman, a very difficult read, obviously heartbreaking in parts, and we're so familiar with the pictures of the three girls, aren't we? But the parents here really wanted to tell people how special their daughters were.
Absolutely, and I think the focus of this interview is so that the world remembers their little girls in the way that they did. They wanted to share more about who they were and their personalities. It's the first time that we've heard from the parents of Elsie Stancombe and BB King, and they really do give us some insight into who their little girls were. There is not much mention of Axel Rudakabana, the person responsible for taking their little girls' lives, or much mention of the riots that erupted in English cities and towns as a result after. Instead, Elsie's parents, for example, speak about how kind, confident and happy she was. Jenny, Elsie's mother, reflects on how excited Elsie had been to go to that dance workshop that day because she wanted to show her friends her newly pierced ears. Similar for BB too. BB's mother spoke about how confident and articulate their daughter was and how she had a great sense of humour. They also spoke, though, about what it was like that day to learn about what had happened to their daughters. We heard that Jenny, Elsie's mother, had a phone call from another parent informing her of what had happened at the workshop and how she had flew out of their home without even locking the doors, desperate to see her daughter. Similar with BB's parents, they were planning for a wedding and had been in Marks and Spencer's when BB's mother received the call from her husband. Both parents saying no one should have had to witness what they did that day.
They were also critical of some of the procedures, though, weren't they? Saying that the part of the trial, the sentencing, shouldn't actually have been televised.
Yes, they speak about how harrowing it was having to listen to the detail of what happened to their little girls in court. This is partly why they wanted to speak, actually, to shed a light on their personalities so that their daughters wouldn't be remembered for those tragic final moments. They have spoken about how neither parents were in court on the day that Axel Rudakabana had decided not to go to trial. He'd entered a guilty plea, and how they had experienced a very short, brief feeling of relief, hoping that maybe they wouldn't have to sit and listen to that harrowing detail. But of course, it was televised, and it meant that they did have to listen to that. They spoke about, David Stancombe spoke about how there was a moment and a little bit of hope that none of it was going to come out. Then there was a phone call the night of from the liaison officers saying that we need to tell you because it's all going to come out. He then says that they were like, what? Quite surprised that this had been sprung upon them. BB's father, who cannot be named due to legal reasons, said similar. He said that we know it had to be heard in court, but questioned why did the whole nation need to see it on television? Really heartfelt tributes, but also shedding light on their experience, how difficult it's been, and also backing calls for a public inquiry too, saying they would support that if it were to happen.
Shaman Freeman-Powell, thank you. Let's go to Westminster now, and Keir Starmer has sacked Health Minister Andrew Gwynn for comments that he made in a WhatsApp group. Mr. Gwynn has apologised for what he described as badly misjudged WhatsApp messages. He's also been suspended as a member of the Labour Party. Well, our political correspondent Serena Barker-Singh is in Westminster for us and can tell us more. Serena, just how damaging is this for the government?
Well, it's certainly disruptive to have to dismiss a junior minister in the health department, a department that you're trying to radically reform and that voters really care about. But it's frankly embarrassing for the government as well, the way that it came about. Now, Andrew Gwynn, he's a long-standing MP since 2005, but the Mail on Sunday have revealed messages from a private WhatsApp group with Labour councillors that he's on, a private WhatsApp group, where allegedly he's reporting, saying a litany of quite shocking things. He said he hoped a pensioner who didn't vote Labour would die before the next election. According to the paper, he's also made some anti-Semitic remarks, saying that someone sounds too Jewish, just apparently from their name. There's also attacks towards his own party, attacking veteran Labour MP Diane Abbott, but also the Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner. Now, he doesn't deny this, but in a statement he says he apologises. He says he deeply regrets the misjudged comments and apologised for any offence that he's caused. Now, the government have swiftly dismissed him. I'm told that they dismissed him as soon as they found out the comments. That was earlier today. And a Labour spokesperson has also told us that he's been administratively suspended, so he's lost the whip. They'll have an investigation and he could lose that forever, potentially causing a by-election. So disruptive not only for the party, but for the government as well.
Serena Barker-Singh with the latest from Westminster. Serena, thank you. A day of tributes has been held in memory of 15-year-old Harvey Wilgoose, who was stabbed to death at his school in Sheffield on Monday. A memorial mass was held this morning, followed by a march to Bramall Lane Stadium ahead of Sheffield United's afternoon game. During the match, supporters and players held a minute's applause in memory of the young football fan. Our North of England correspondent Charlotte Leeming has this report.
The family of Harvey Wilgoose arrived for a special mass to commemorate his young life. St Joseph's Church in Sheffield was packed full of people of all ages, each of them wanting to pay their respects to the 15-year-old who died after being stabbed at his school on Monday.
The focus was very much to do with being with the family and, supporting them always, and to remember that this is a young life, a beautiful life, that has now come to a tragic end.
After a reflective church service, hundreds joined Harvey's family for a very public memorial march. The teenager was a huge Sheffield United fan, so they walked together from the city centre to the Bramall Lane ground. His parents and sister leading the way. They carried a huge banner with the words, "Lives, not knives."
I think that people need to see that there's a problem. It's not bad having a problem. The bad part is not having a solution to a problem. And I think that's where we are. I think schools need to, acknowledge the problem and put in preventions before it's too late.
The event was extremely emotional. Amongst the crowd were many of Harvey's young friends who regularly watch football with him.
Harvey was a loving, caring boy. He was a big supporter of the United. He was a loving friend. He was really good to the community.
Tim Baker came along with his son Will. He works at a college next to the school where the incident happened.
A lot of my students were realising it was their friend, and a lot of people knew Harvey. And I think the sight of some of my kids coming up to me saying, "Sir, can I leave?" because I knew Harvey, and then sprinting out of college is something I never want to go through again, because it wasn't pleasant.
Sheffield United also paid tribute to Harvey. In the 15th minute of their game against Portsmouth, all football rivalries were set aside for a minute's applause. Harvey's family say they're utterly devastated by his death. But today his mum Caroline said the outpouring of support from the people of Sheffield is what's getting them through it. Charlotte Leeming, Sky News, Sheffield.
The funeral industry is facing calls for reform over how it's regulated. It comes after a series of distressing stories about the mistreatment of bodies. Matthew Thompson talked to one woman whose grief was compounded by the ill treatment of her mother's body, and a warning his report contains details of that mishandling.
2 years ago, Daney lost her mum, Janice. It was sudden, unexpected, traumatic. But what happened next compounded Daney's trauma. Janice's body had been left in the care of a funeral director. Something went horribly wrong.
You've shown us these photographs of your mum, and they are really, really quite distressing. We're not going to put these on the television, but can you just tell us what is here in your own words?
Well, she's covered in blood. She's severely bloated to the point of bursting. She looks terrible. She looks all battered and bruised, like she's been killed in a violent attack. When she wasn't, she died in her sleep. She just looks awful. Devastated. I couldn't sleep. I was like thinking all sorts, like thinking like the way the Twitter, like if they'd just been tossing her about like she was nothing, and it was horrible. It's had a massive effect on us. It's ruined my life. I'm sorry.
It's all right, take your time.
Daney asked another funeral director to step in and help. But as her mum's body deteriorated, it became harder to work out who was responsible.
Funeral directors are entirely unregulated. Standards are in theory upheld by a patchwork of trade bodies who are largely powerless to enforce them. In this case, the first funeral director was investigated and reprimanded, but simply didn't recognise the finding and doesn't accept responsibility. The second funeral director couldn't be investigated as they weren't a member of the trade body, and Daney was left with nowhere else to turn. We spoke to both funeral directors, who each gave accounts absolving themselves of blame. We also reached out to the trade bodies SAFE and the British Institute of Embalmers.
SAFE said, "We don't believe the industry is marking its own homework. SAFE's standards framework is monitored by the UK Accreditation Service. We've long supported the call for regulation of the funeral sector." The British Institute of Embalmers said, "We would certainly welcome structured regulation within the industry. The industry does really mark its own homework." In 2022, the Fuller inquiry was set up to examine how David Fuller was able to commit sexual offences at mortuaries in Kent. Its chair recently said regulation is urgent. And last year, police began investigating legacy funeral directors in Hull after a report that bodies were not being properly cared for.
So first of all, I should say that the vast majority of funeral directors will give good care. But the lack of regulation does mean that there is no training that they are required to take. There are no particular facilities, the condition that they keep the premises in.
And not even any requirement to have a fridge of any kind.
No, absolutely. There isn't a requirement to have cold storage, refrigerated facilities, which most people will find shocking. It seems completely unbelievable.
In a statement, the Ministry of Justice told us they were reviewing the full range of possible next steps, including looking at options for regulation. No required training, no independent oversight, no inspection. And until that changes, for Daney and others like her, no answers and no redress. Matthew Thompson, Sky News.
Salvage crews from the National Transportation Safety Board have recovered the remains of the Black Hawk helicopter, which collided mid-air with an American Airlines passenger plane last month. 67 people were killed in the crash, which sent both aircraft into Washington's Potomac River. The investigation into what caused America's worst air disaster since 2001 is ongoing, with officials reviewing data from both aircraft and the actions of the military pilot and air traffic control. A British couple found dead at their villa in southwestern France have been named locally as Andrew and Dawn Searle. It's understood they had moved to France from Scotland 10 years ago and got married in the summer of 2023. The cause of their death is not yet clear. The Duchess of Sussex has joined her husband at the Invictus Games in Canada. The 7th edition of the Games, established by Prince Harry in 2014, is being held in Vancouver, bringing together more than 500 competitors from 23 countries. The royal couple famously appeared in public together for the first time when the Games were held in Toronto in 2017, when they were pictured hand in hand at a wheelchair tennis event. The King hosted a star-studded Italian-themed dinner at his Highgrove estate in celebration of Italian food ahead of his state visit to Italy and the Vatican later this year. The King and Queen were joined by Victorian David Beckham, Donatella Versace and Dame Helen Mirren. A warning, our royal correspondent Laura Bundock's report coming up has some flash photography.
In the heart of Highgrove, a little Italy. And Hollywood, as this British royal residence hosted an Italian dinner. Designed at the request of the King by the actor cum cook Stanley Tucci. They're all here to celebrate slow food and slow fashion. But as the King moved around the room, no sign he's slowing down. Mingling, mixing, even making martinis. He is still receiving regular cancer treatment, but keen to keep his calendar busy. With this engagement coming before the King and Queen's official trip to Italy in April.
When you first put the idea of this dinner, I needed little persuading. And I'm especially pleased that it comes just a few weeks before my wife and I will be paying a state visit to Italy. And, ladies and gentlemen, to say that we are looking forward to it would be to engage in just a little British understatement.
The meal was also a moment to savour Anglo-Italian relations.
Being at the table together engenders new relationships, solidifies old ones, repairs a broken bridge or two, and creates bonds between cultures even as diverse as the United Kingdom and Italy.
A year on from the dual royal cancer diagnoses, this week has felt like the family back to business, with several high-profile engagements. They've been keeping the show on the road, but the King himself a driving force, filling his time and diary his remedy for recovery. Laura Bundock, Sky News.
Thailand is dealing with toxic smog. Pollution is linked to the deaths of more than 100 children under 5 every day in Southeast Asia. That's according to the UN. Authorities in the Thai capital, Bangkok, are trying a new approach now to try to solve the problem. Cordelia Lynch joined them on their flight.
In Thailand, the government hopes this will lift a toxic haze hanging over them. They're pumping water onto planes to battle air pollution. We're on board what they call the Rainmaker.
Are you surprised by how bad the smog is right now?
Yes, I'm very surprised. I think it's like it's have higher every year.
The big worry right now are the PM 2.5 levels, cancer-causing particles that get into the lungs and bloodstream. Recently, they were 8 times what the World Health Organization recommends.
These 2 containers are full of icy water, and the hope is that by releasing them, they will cool down the warmer air below and help to disperse some of the particles. But critics say there is no proof yet that this method actually works.
This is what it looks like from outside. A white mist sprayed over dusty skies at an altitude of about 5,000 feet.
Have you seen that it's making any kind of difference?
I think it's working, but in the scale of the whole city, I think it helps, but it's not maybe not that much because the air pollution is let's say it's increased every year. We're approaching our target.
This is unconventional and unproven. But below is a country suffering. Pollution has made more than 1 million people ill here since late 2023 and cost Thailand more than £70 million in medical expenses.
How big do you think the challenge of this is?
It's like a very huge scale problem. This is one of our mission here is one of helping, but it's not solve the problem, you know?
It's a bit of a drop in the ocean, this.
Yes, right, yes, like that.
In the rice, sugarcane and corn fields, you can see traces of what's causing the pollution.
This is a big part of the problem, slash and burn farming. It's a cheap and efficient way to clear the land, but it's hazardous for health. There are rules against it, but they're rarely enforced, and big business is driving up demand.
But it's not the only reason people are masking up and schools are closing. The traffic is toxic too. Free public transport, not enough to fix it. Every day in Southeast Asia, pollution is linked to the deaths of more than 100 children under 5. A silent killer, perhaps, but in an era when governments know the risks. Cordelia Lynch, Sky News, Hua Hin, Thailand.
Let's get the latest sport now from Sky Sports News and Alice.
Staying connected is vital for business. Sky Business sponsors this report.
I've had a wonderful career in football, but now I want to give something back. I want to help our game's young players.
Whether you do or don't make it, you're prepared for life itself.
One player makes it, then I've done my job.
This time I'm looking at other ways we can support our younger footballers.
I still have them dreams that normal parents have.
It's exciting to know that you've got a child who actually has a love for something and wants to pursue it.
Have you not owned it yet? No.
Southampton's academy has an incredible record of producing talent. And one of the biggest success stories has recently rejoined the club. But could there be another Adam Lallana making his name in red and white in the future?
I'm just like a normal parent. I'm excited that my lad's in the system. I'm probably more excited watching his games than I'm playing my games now.
I'm a very fortunate parent that I have support as well. So when I can't take Arthur, I've got, whether it's my wife or grandparents, and I know a lot of parents, don't have access to that, aren't able to get the time off work. So it can become stressful for the parents. When parents become stressed, at times they won't know they're doing it, but they put more pressure on the kids. There's an external pressure of making it professionally, which is extremely unrealistic. The football club do a lot to help parents, giving them money per mile for the travelling, and that should happen. There probably should be even more in place, because it only takes one big sale from a youth team player, whether it's Theo or Foxo Chamberlain eventually going, that contributes to every other player that hasn't made it. They can be damaged. When Jurgen Klopp told me there wasn't going to be a contract at Liverpool and I need to find another club, I was distraught for a week.
Even at that age, with all what you've done?
With all that I'd done, with all the success I'd had, that feeling that I had, I remember for the next week of rejection. It was the right thing. I knew there wasn't going to be a contract, but him actually saying to me, there's not going to be a contract, you need to find another club. And I remember just how I slept the next week. It was tough. Imagine what these young boys, that it's their dream to become professional.
What advice would you have to the parents who have these youngsters who are going through the system?
So just because I'm a player and I've played, I still have them dreams that normal parents have. It's so important that we don't pass that pressure on to our kids, whether it's a young girl or a young boy in the academy. I was so lucky. I never felt an ounce of pressure growing up from my parents, not an ounce. So there was never, ever any pressure to perform, to play, to be a professional. I always kind of had to find that myself. If you want to be a professional, you'll learn in the end what you need to do. I'm like a normal parent, but if I've had a bad day or a bad training session myself and then I come and watch my lad, I talk to myself and I say, don't take it out on him today. Don't, if he has a bad session, say, what you're not doing this for, what you're doing that for. You know, I kind of say to myself, when he gets in the car, did you enjoy that today?
Yeah.
Did you enjoy it? Did you have fun? Did you work hard? The pressure's coming. If you're going to make it as a professional, it is coming. It's tough at times, so we don't want the kids feeling it prematurely.
I wanted to hear a bit more from parents. They play such a big role, all that time and all those sacrifices for their kids to just have a chance of making it. So I turned to someone who's seen it from all sides.
Sky Business sponsors this report.
And that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's papers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by political commentator Benedict Spence and journalist and author Christina Patterson. Welcome both. Among the stories we will be discussing, this on the front of the Times. The Southport stabbings families were looking for light in the darkness. We'll be right back.
It's like a football final with only one team on the pitch. This isn't just a call to vote, but a call to remember. The freedom fought for by the African National Congress.
I'm Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky's Africa correspondent based in Johannesburg, South Africa.
A cyclone and 2 burst dams wiped out hundreds of generational homes.
This was the second dam that the floodwaters hit before it tore into Derna. We are in the heart of Nairobi, and we're watching as protesters were heavily tear gassed.
The sheer fearlessness and persistence of these guys is astonishing.
We help you understand the world with us. I remember going into the iconic Durman market in the heart of Sudan's capital for the first time since the war started. And this is what's left of it. Bullet holes through buildings, shelled balconies, bullet cases on the floor. I witnessed the complete destruction of a place linked to my childhood memories and the lives of millions of people. This is insane. This was a bustling residential area. So many friends who lived here. My most memorable interview was with a 15-year-old boy who'd survived being stranded on a migrant boat on its way from Senegal to the Canary Islands.
After 13 days, our food, water and fuel supply ran out.
I felt awe when we saw the mountain gorillas in Rwanda.
We call him the king of the jungle. This is the alpha silverback.
Sky News. Get the full story first. Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky News.
Mandatory evacuation, you must leave!
For many people, Harvey is far from over.
People here believe the water will be this deep for weeks.
I'm Greg Milam, and I'm Sky's chief North of England correspondent.
Are you trying to run me over, Sir Philip?
No, go away.
Look like it, sir. Will you respond to those who made accusations, Sir Philip?
Can you go away?
Sky News, the full story first.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people. Welcome to the Politics Hub.
Our police force has apologised. If you want to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Are you not concerned that that could lead to all-out war?
Hello there, good evening. There are fears of an upsurge in violence. What's at stake here?
You are watching the press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive.
This is Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview. A first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. But first, our top stories. 3 Israeli hostages have been freed by Hamas and over 180 Palestinian prisoners released by Israel, as local reports say Benjamin Netanyahu has sent a delegation to Qatar for Phase 2 ceasefire talks. The parents of 2 of the Southport victims have described their sense of loss as they back calls for a public inquiry. And the Duchess of Sussex has joined her husband at the Invictus Games in Canada. The Games, established by Prince Harry in 2014, are being held in Vancouver. Hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with political commentator Benedict Spence and the journalist and author Christina Patterson. Great to see you both. Let's see what is on some of those front pages now. Well, the Sunday Telegraph leads with a story about Health Minister Andrew Gwynn, who's been sacked after saying he hoped a pensioner who did not vote for Labour at the election would die. The Mail on Sunday also reports on the story about Gwynn's Hope You Die jibe about a pensioner, calling the messages a damning dossier of vile WhatsApps. The Observer leads with Labour's plan to fix the benefit system to get people back into work. The Sunday Express reports on the Tories' call for a pact with Reform UK to beat Labour in the next general election. The Sunday Times features the first emotional interview with the parents of 2 of the 3 young girls killed in the Southport stabbings last summer. The Sunday Mirror also reports on the parents speaking out for the first time since the attacks and recalling the horror of the day their daughters died. The Sunday People also leads with the tributes from the parents of the Southport stabbing victims. The Sun on Sunday takes a different angle on the Southport victims with an exclusive interview with a man who confronted the knife attacker, who says the horror will live with me forever. And the Star reports this February will be the coldest for 6 years, thanks to a cold front sweeping across the North Sea. And we are joined by Christina and Benedict. Great to have you, as always, here on a Saturday night. Let's start with, there's 2 main stories, obviously. The interview with the parents of 2 of the Southport stabbing victims, but also that hostage release that we saw, the 5th now, as part of the ceasefire deal. So if we go to the Observer, on the front page there, very striking picture. A Palestinian girl stands among Hamas fighters at yesterday's handover of the 3 hostages in Gaza. Christina, if I can start with you. I mean, Hamas, we've seen them do it for every hostage exchange. They really make the most of having the spotlight.
Yeah, they turn it into major theatre, and that it's so striking, that photo of that little girl, and it makes one think of the thousands of tens of thousands of children who've died during this war, obviously, which started with 1,200 Israelis murdered brutally, and how it has escalated into this mass murder, essentially, something that does look rather like genocide in Gaza. And today clearly was a good day for the families of the hostages who were released, but tragically, one of them, Eli Shariabi, he was filmed earlier talking about how much he was looking forward to seeing his wife and children who were killed in that Hamas attack on 7th of October. So the sort of sadness and tragedy goes on and on and on. And there's been comment from many people that the Israeli hostages look very thin, and they do. It doesn't look as if they've been terribly well treated, but the same can be said of many of the Palestinian hostages. And I think, all of this is utterly tragic and made a million times more tragic by Donald Trump's comments this week, which clearly are unlikely to help any ceasefire deal and unlikely to help any moves towards a 2-state solution. So the whole thing is just heartbreaking.
I mean, you mentioned Eli Shirabi, and obviously his wife was Bristol-born, and she was murdered along with their 2 daughters on October 7th. And just to add, obviously, the Israelis deny the allegation of genocide, although, they have been accused of war crimes by the International Court. What do you make of the impact that this might have on the second phase of the hostage deal. We're hearing the Israelis have sent a delegation to Qatar.
The second phase of the hostage deal, of the ceasefire, I mean, for as long as Hamas has hostages, it has a form of leverage. And I think that what Hamas will fear in the coming weeks and months is a loss of influence and power in Gaza. One thing that we have to say is, as much as they are sort of demonstrating strength by sort of turning out and they're putting back on their military uniforms now that they aren't allowed to be shot at by the Israelis, they're brave enough to not dress as civilians now. They have been decimated. There's no question about that. The Israeli campaign has been brutally effective in rooting out the high command of Hamas and taking out great swathes of the ground personnel as well. So there are questions actually about the degree to which Hamas is going to be able to maintain control in the Gaza Strip. And of course, that will be, the spotlight will really be on that, of course, if the United States does decide to press on with any kind of deal, or indeed if it decides to outsource that to maybe the Gulf Cooperation Council, or indeed if the Israelis decide to go back in at a later stage because perhaps this all falls to pieces. Because let's be clear, this is not a peace deal. This is a temporary pause. Israel still holds the upper hand. If the Israelis decide that they would actually quite like to go back into Gaza, they can do that. They can operate more or less with impunity. That is why a ceasefire was able to be agreed, because Hamas had taken such major losses. So that, I think, is going to be the crux of all of this, is that Hamas has one thing really going for it, and that is hostages. At no stage throughout any of this conflict was there any suggestion that any other country would actually come to its aid. Iran fired missiles from afar. It was never actually going to put boots on the ground. None of the other Arab countries were ever going to go to war with Israel. They didn't even sever their diplomatic ties, the ones that had established them with Israel. So that's all that they've got left. We see this sort of drip feed of hostages being released. I suspect not all of them will be, though, because there will be that desire to hold on to a sort of a very priceless and very small bargaining chip at the end of this.
I mean, it was interesting as well. I mean, the hostages that were released today looked incredibly weak, emaciated. Gal Hirsch, who is the hostage coordinator, Benjamin Netanyahu's hostage coordinator, did condemn Hamas for the physical condition of the hostages. And talking about Trump, he said on Friday, there is no rush to implement his plan for Gaza. So that's what he mentioned about the whole thing. He said, well, I mean, we'll see
having
how
blown up decades of Middle East so-called diplomacy with a completely wacko desire to invade, take over another country that has absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with you, but is only the latest in a long list, so...
We'll see how all of that develops. But certainly, you know, a lot of the families of the hostages in Israel really care about, obviously, the second phase and the release of the remaining hostages. Let's go to the Times now. Front page. Now, they have an exclusive interview with the parents of two of the three little girls that were murdered in Southport in July. The parents of B.B. King and Elsie Dot. Very moving interview. I mean, it's interesting. These are new pictures, but we're so used to seeing the pictures that we've been seeing, heartbreaking, of the two little girls. And in this interview, Benedict, the parents really, I guess, want to tell us how special their little girls, they're humanized them.
And that's entirely understandable, because a lot of the fixation of this story has been on the murderer in question. And that is very often the case, because there is that sort of fascination both with the macabre and the horror and the sort of the trying to come to terms and understanding how somebody could commit something so awful. And then, of course, there is the fixation on the awfulness of the acts themselves. Very often the victims do get forgotten in sort of the melee, because that's where a lot of the emphasis goes. So it's understandable, therefore, why parents would want to perhaps turn the attention back to their children, to the victims, and want to talk about not the horror that befell them, but actually the rest of their lives, because they were alive for a period of time and they achieved things and they did things and they were known to people beyond simply this story. So understandable, I think, and after everything that's happened, perhaps a good note to end on for those to perhaps provide some sort of clarity, some sort of positivity, beyond simply their children being part of a horror story, is that actually we get to focus on their lives. They have some criticisms as well for how things were handled, but also a lot of praise. You know, for instance, staff at Alder Hey, police, Merseyside police, that sort of thing. So there is, you know, there's two sides to the story there. It's not simply negativity.
The criticism was about the televising of the sentencing, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, I think there's always that. It's very difficult because obviously Axel Riedel-Barner was, you know, a very, very troubled and, you know, people have said evil person and clearly what he did was absolutely horrific. I think it would be very hard to say, oh, please, let's not talk about the murderer in these situations, because, of course, you will. You know, when someone does something as horrific as that, there is an interest in his sentencing, but I completely understand the impulse of the parents, and it's just heartbreaking, the interviews they've given. The parents of Elsie, for example, talked about how incredibly loving and sweet she was. And when her father lost his mother, she wanted to support her father's little girl. She wanted to go running with her father to support him through his bereavement, which is just a heartbreaking note in all of this. So I'm glad that the Sunday Times has put photos of 2 of these little girls on the front page. And I hope for the parents' sake that some of these details of their beautiful children do get lodged in the public consciousness, because that's obviously what they want people to remember.
It's a very touching read. Let's go to the Telegraph now on the front page. And this is Andrew Gwynn, a health minister, sacked for saying pensioners should die. This comments made on a WhatsApp group that he obviously regrets.
Yeah, not all pensioners, just one pensioner in particular. Perhaps that makes it even worse that he's singled out an individual pensioner. But this was in response to a pensioner complaining about their bin service and pointing out that they hadn't voted for the Labour Party at the local elections, to which the response was, well, thanks for nothing, basically, and we hope you croak before the next elections. There is a slew of messages in a WhatsApp chat. And, you know, it's dreadful, of course, that MPs are saying things about people, but it's more the stupidity that I find the really sort of demoralising thing. It's not so much that people might crack bad jokes, it's the fact that you are a public official, an MP, and you think you can put this sort of into a domain. It's not just 1 or 2 people in this WhatsApp chat, there's quite a large one. And you just think, you know, did you just think it would be fine, that nobody would notice
because
that this would be
here,
all
a WhatsApp group for Labour Party figures in his local areas.
Yeah. And of course, given that this is a Labour Party story, there is also the odd sprinkling of anti-Semitism, there's the odd bit of sexism as well. You know, they've covered all bases. There's a Mossad reference, there's talk about sex acts. It's sort of very classy stuff.
Well, and making extremely unpleasant comments about Angela Rayner, which are, well, I won't go into what they are, but, you know, kind of sexual assumptions, just deeply repellent, totally repellent. And I have to say, apart from anything else, I mean, I agree with you, Benedict, about the stupidity. How on earth could you put that stuff in writing, if you even thought that? But given that everybody is always wanting more devolution, the idea that local officials should be, I mean, the word mediocrity would be far too kind to them, absolutely thick as, well, I won't even say thick as what.
And also the entitlement.
Horrific.
The entitlement of going, well, thanks for nothing, we don't care that you didn't vote for us.
Horrific.
I mean, we're showing the Sunday Telegraph, it's actually a Mail on Sunday story. Very briefly to both of you, how damaging do you think this is for the government, Benedict?
I mean, I don't think that this is going to be the thing that sort of holds the government feet to the fire. There's plenty of other things going on. It's more, I think, that general sort of sense of Labour decided they were going to go in for the line of, we are the adults, we're going to be back in charge. Here's an example of us behaving much as actually a lot of MPs have always behaved, with complete contempt for the electorate.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't think this is a Labour or Tory issue. Of course, these things are always politicised. It's a stupid human being issue, and there do seem to be an awful lot of them around.
Christina, Benedict, stay with us. Coming up, we'll tell you why some Tories might be calling for a pact with Reform UK.
We're going to do this 100 times every day for the next 3 months.
Why have we agreed to this?
Raises many questions about many things.
Actually seeing people impacted. She was so upset.
It was powerful. They kind of couldn't believe they were being berated here.
Very much on my terms, I think was the subtext. News happens fast around Donald Trump.
It was a kind of wow moment.
Yeah, that's what it feels like, doesn't it?
It's Trump world, and we just live in it.
So, where next?
Follow Trump 100 wherever you get your podcasts.
The judge made it very clear that she could see no justifiable reason why Sakulas wasn't here facing British justice.
I promised I would get him justice.
Sky News, get the full story first. It's legal to let go.
Set the speed and take the hands off.
I I'm Lisa Dowd and I'm Sky's Midlands correspondent.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
Live here from Washington.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place. And all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
A show of military might and menace. Why should the West trust you?
Frankly, I don't care whether the West trusts us or not.
Sky News. Get the full story first. Have a quick word for Sky News. Is the West right? Are you fueling Russia's war machine? American journalist Evan Gershkovich is on trial here, but was first on display. I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent.
The Premier League is exclusively on Peacock. Two of the league's biggest clubs find themselves at the wrong end of the table.
And the mood turns extremely sour.
Desperately chasing a win to turn their season around.
It's a beautiful finish.
Tottenham Hotspur.
To Eriksen. Back towards Anna.
Manchester United. This is the Premier League. February 16, only on Peacock.
I saw police being forceful, pushing young men and women to the ground as they made almost 100 arrests. Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support.
Free, wherever you get your news.
The people here know that worse storms may well be on their way.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles.
Mandatory evacuation, you must leave!
For many people, Harvey is far from over.
People here believe the water will be this deep for weeks. I'm Greg Milam and I'm Sky's Chief North of England correspondent. Are you trying to run me over, Sir Philip?
No, go away.
Look like it, sir. Will you respond to those who made accusations, Sir Philip?
Can you go away?
Sky News, the full story first.
Welcome back. You're watching the press preview with me now, Christina Patterson and Benedict Spence. Let's go straight to the Sunday Express. And their front page here, Tories call for reform pact to save UK. Benedict, I'm going to start with you here because obviously we've had opinion polls that now show reform ahead of all the other parties. So what do you make of this article and the possibility of, I guess, I don't know, a union, a coalition between Reform and the Tories?
This is Lord McKinley, and of course we've had these things before. I think, is it Jacob Rees-Mogg has previously said that he thinks there should be some sort of non-aggression pact between Conservatives and Reform. And I tell you what, it doesn't look particularly good if you're a Conservative and you're coming out and saying, oh, we should do a deal, because that sort of suggests that you're running scared. And I think that there's
Are they
a
running
lot
scared, do you think?
I suspect they probably are, because, well, two things, actually. Reform only seems to have two policies, which is lower immigration and lower taxes. And that's going absolute gangbusters because they are polling ahead of everybody else, but nobody seems to know really what the Tories are. And when they float ideas, people go, oh, well, that's a nice idea. How long are you in government for? Why didn't you do it then? And so it's rather difficult for them to cut through. They are going down in the polls as much as Reform are actually rising. I think that's a key thing. Kemi Badenoch is not really inspiring an awful lot of confidence amongst the rank and file. And I think it is, unless something changes, there is still obviously a lot of time until the next general election, but unless something changes pretty soon, it does look as though Reform could actually sort of seize on a lot of the airwaves as much as anything else. They're not the opposition, as much as they like to sort of joke about being the opposition. They don't have that position, but they are getting a lot more airtime. People are listening, I think, more to what their MPs have to say. And again, largely that is because people are fed up of the Conservatives. It's not simply because Reform are doing any well. So you're going to hear a lot more of this. But I think as much as there are people who would like that, there are also Conservatives who would rather lose a general election than see Nigel Farage actually get any kind of amount of power. And frankly, I think a lot of Reform voters would not thank the party if it then said, yeah, we're going to do a deal with these people who you feel betrayed
Christina,
you.
briefly.
Well, I think that Reform have no policies at all except being anti-everything. They've said, Nigel Farage this week, when he was pressed about, because they're now, of course, they're saying that Brexit was a failure because they've seen that public opinion has turned massively against it. But he can't find a single way in which it has failed. They have no policies, they have no ideas. But yes, the Tories are terrified and Labour are terrified as well because Reform has outstripped both Labour and Tories in a number of polls this week. So, yeah, I mean, Farage doesn't have to say anything. And he has his own broadcasting channel on GB News. So, and he's very big on TikTok. So I think it's an alarming time for British politics. I think the Tories have got... they're not doing well, but, I mean, they created the mess that we're currently in. And for Kemi Badenoch to talk about immigration and how, we need to be tougher on immigration now, when it was under her government that it went up 3 times in a few years, is somewhat rich.
Going to have to move on quickly. We don't have a lot of time. Front page of the Sunday Times, speaking of Labour, Keir Starmer asked civil service head to quash a BBC story, the story about Sue Gray being paid more than him.
Yeah, this is an extract from the book Get In, which is all about how Keir Starmer has become Prime Minister, and this is the idea that the PM asked Simon Case, the Cabinet Secretary, to try to have this story squashed. He went to Tim Davie, the Director General, and he went to Chris Mason, the BBC's chief political editor, and they ran the story anyway. The idea being they didn't want this in the public domain because they thought it would set the wrong precedent, that it was, the idea that an advisor could earn more than the Prime Minister, might give the impression that she had a slightly outsized role, which elsewhere in the book actually does suggest, I think Morgan McSweeney says that Keir Starmer isn't actually in charge of the government and that Sue Gray had more influence. So you can imagine why they wouldn't want that impression being given.
We've got 30 seconds on the whole programme, so we can't talk about any detail. Let me just pull up the front page of the Sunday Telegraph. Trump, I will not deport Prince Harry. And we will talk about that in the 11:30 press preview because we just haven't got the time. But that's the headline. Christina, Benedict, thank you both so much. And that's it for now, but stay with us. Coming up next on Sky News at 11, 3 more Israeli hostages are freed by Hamas and 183 Palestinians are released by Israel under the Gaza ceasefire agreement.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people. Welcome to the Politics Hub.
Our police force has apologised. If you wanted to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks. I'm live in Jerusalem.
Are you not concerned that that could lead to all-out war?
Hello there, good evening. There are fears of an upsurge in violence. What's at stake here?
You are watching the press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive.